All right, good people. This is Eddie Gray, that Logic Pro guy. Welcome to the video. Where are my Logic Pro files? And today we're going to talk about the most important files in Logic Pro. Before we get started, go ahead and like the video. Go ahead and subscribe. Now, let's get into it. Now, we're talking about the most vital files in Logic Pro. This is going to definitely start with what's called the preference list, aka plist. These have to do with your settings. Now, what exactly do I mean by settings? Every time you make a change to your Logic Pro settings, control bar, toolbar, inspector, track header, channel strips in the mixer, etc., a file is being updated in the background. This file is called the plist file, and it's automatically saved each and every time you quit Logic Pro. As someone that's been using this program for 10 years, let me tell you with complete certainty that how you set up Logic Pro has so much to do with not only how you relate to this amazing DAW, but how you experience it as you work with it. It's akin to a race car driver or a pilot setting up his or her station to his or her liking. Obviously, this kind of thing needs a bit of attention. Let me give you an example. Let's say you make changes to the Logic Pro settings. Under the view icon, you decide to make more visible the local menus. Make the playhead wider so it's easier to see. Show help tags when hovering over MIDI events or dragging any regions to check their position and length. Maybe you want to increase the size of the inspectors and add default values to gather more immediate data by enabling default values. I also like to change the background appearance of my piano roll editor for the extra added contrast, which in my opinion makes it easier when you're editing all things MIDI. As these are changes made in Logic Pro settings, they are global and will continue to show up with every new session. Now, this is without having to set them up again and again. This differs from the project settings, which are changes made to the session that are project specific. Things like metronome settings, smart tempo, synchronization, so on and so forth. The next time I open up Logic Pro, because I took the time to set everything up just the way I like it, I can get right back into my zone without having to menu dive again. This is critical if we're going to be efficient. If I had to set up Logic every time I open the program, this would be an absolute nightmare, right? Here is where the plist file is located. As this is one of the most important files in Logic Pro, please be sure to save it. Be sure to back it up on an external hard drive on the cloud. I warn you now that if this file gets corrupted for whatever reason, or you maybe throw it away by mistake and you don't have a backup, you're going to have to set everything up all over again. So this is a big danger sign. Over 150 parameters will potentially be initialized, which means that they will be brought back to their original state when you trash the preferences. In other words, all that hard work will have been done in vain. Peter Schwartz, a great Logic Pro mind, wrote an amazing article for Mac Pro Video on the subject. He details the consequences of what happens when you throw away the plist file. Link in the description. Here are other consequences of throwing away a corrupted plist file. In addition to the configuration in the Logic Pro settings window, the control bar, the aforementioned toolbar, inspector channel strip components, user default of the track header components, user default of the channel strip components, new tracks dialog detail settings, and key commands. Now, there may be times when you need to reset or throw away this plist file, and that's great. You can perhaps use it as a way to troubleshoot. This is exactly why you need a plist file in its pure state, backed up so you can restore all of your settings immediately. Let's say you're being a good lad and you back up your plist and one day Logic starts acting erratically. You can simply throw away the plist in its current state and restore it with the unaffected backup plist and quite literally continue working as if nothing had happened. I can't tell you how many times I've seen my fellow brothers and sisters fall into this trap. Don't let it happen to you. Another important file in Logic Pro is the cist file. So very much like the plist file, this has to do with changes that are being made to your control surfaces, if you have any. Now, I personally haven't had that much issues with the Logic's preferences list, but I've had a ton of issues with the cist file. It seems that every time I create a new set of assigned parameters on a control surface, it misreads them or simply just forgets about them. If you've watched my video series on control surfaces, you know how convoluted this entire area of Logic Pro can be. This is where you can find Logic Pro's cist file. So as we're talking about the most important files in Logic Pro, it would also serve us well to take a minute and look at the most useless files in Logic Pro. We've got a second project templates folder that seems to have no use whatsoever. I've talked about performances and how they don't really have a place in today's Logic Pro. There's a random sampler folder that seems to have no purpose. There's a presets folder which seems to have no purpose whatsoever. And finally, a plugins folder which seems to be inherited from times past. These files were either inherited from previous versions of Logic Pro, or they're simply oversights. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this video on where are my Logic Pro files. If you found it to be useful, go ahead and like the video. I have a ton of videos like this on the channel, so go ahead, watch this series, share with all your friends, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.